Today we're once again talking about the god with a many pronunciation. Nikki, Nike, Nike, whatever you want to call her. For the purpose of this video we'll call her Nikki and we go with that for the rest of it. What we're talking about specifically is her passive. Now most of you are aware of the passive as a whole, being a relatively strong passive, giving your allies bonus power plus movement speed. When the passive is addressed in regards to balancing changes to the god, what people mostly talk about is the extra power. On full stacks, the bonus power of Nike's passive is 12%, which is basically a little more than half a red buff or almost half a Rod of Tahuti in terms of the passive benefit of that. So pretty solid extra power. What many people underestimate is the other part of the passive, which is bonus movement speed. The team-wide buff of plus 7% movement speed on max stacks is quite significant for a particular reason. It does much more than just drastically increasing your chase potential. In fact, this extra movement speed allows you to get a 10% movement speed item and have almost the same movement speed as somebody who bought boots. What does that mean? Exactly, you can basically sell your boots late game. There were previous instances where people have tried to create builds that go without boots, mostly because back then we had other items that provide you with movement speed, or because they just wanted to see if it works somehow, but that almost always came with a problem. If you wanted to match the enemy's movement speed, then you needed boots, simply because the enemy had them. With Nike, this is different. There is no way to permanently lose her full passive. So it doesn't really matter in that regard, whereas with other movement speed passives like Amaterasu, you for example have to be close to her for it to work. So in that regard, we already have a benefit that is exclusive to Nikki. The other benefit is, as long as the enemy team doesn't have a Nikki themselves, which will only happen in casuals in the first place and won't be that likely a bit down the road I think, we will be able to only have that extra movement speed on our own team, while the enemy team has less movement speed at the end of the game, meaning they have to keep their boots to be even with you in movement speed while you don't have your boots. To make this clear right now, this is not a scenario that will happen all too often, simply because you actually have to be at full build for it to make sense, and most games are over before that. So this is a niche topic, but at the same time, I think it's worth pointing out, simply so that people are aware that if they get to that stage of the game where you have the full passive and you have your full default build, you can trade out that item. Especially because the passive is not really that hard to reach in a game that's a bit dragged out. Usually you get the kill part and the minion kill part relatively quick, and the one that you wait longest for is the 2 level 20s, and that happens eventually. So what are our options here? Let's first look at hunters. If you're a hunter and you're looking for a very late game focused build, you would probably usually go for Ninja Tabi. Ninja Tabi in its stats is pretty solid. The extra mana is not that great late game. You get 20% attack speed and you get 20 physical power. Another item that provides you with movement speed and attack speed is Hasten Fatalis. Hasten Fatalis gives you an extra 30% attack speed, which in the end in late game usually works a little bit in Hasten Fatalis' favor, simply because the attack speed is a stat that you don't get as much of as power in many situations, either going for a lot of crit or going for kin size as well, where the benefit of attack speed is just higher. Not necessarily always 100% the case, but often it works out that way. And on top of that, you get a crazy good passive that is nice if you can afford it and you actually have an extra slot, and you don't have to sacrifice anything else with it, as you usually would with Hasten Fatalis. So you can actually go Hasten Fatalis on almost any ADC in late game and it will make sense. That's one perk. But you don't have to go Hasten Fatalis. You also, if you compare the option of normal boots here, you have Warrior Tabi with 40 physical power and 18% movement speed. But there's another item that offers you a little more for a little higher price, and also benefits very much from the same movement speed perk from Nikki. That is Masamune. Masamune gives you 50 physical power, the 10% movement speed, and it also gives you additional physical power against gods with higher health than you, which will be the case in late game, and that's up to 50 extra power. So if you want to go for the passive just for the fun of it, then you can go Haste Fatalis. If you want to maximize your damage, most of the time Masamune should be the better choice, instead of your boots. And that's just hunters. Obviously this can work on some assassins as well, especially Masamune is a thing here, or Hasten Fatalis can be kept on, for example, Kali. Primarily hunters, but both can make use of it. There's another option for assassins that I feel is usually a little better, and that is Stonecutting Sword if you haven't built it earlier. Stonecutting Sword, quite expensive, so it takes a while to get in, but it gives you 50 physical power, also has a 10% movement speed, and on top of that, you get the protection shred from the enemy, reducing the protection by up to 30 and increasing your own by up to 30 at the same time. While this is primarily built on basic attack assassins, this also makes sense on ability-based assassins that get a few basic attacks in between instead of boots, simply because it's still stronger than boots. So for example on Thor, this could still work out pretty well. Though, on the other hand, if you're against a very tanky comp, then Masamune can be just as great. More depending on how you want to focus the enemy team. Usually you're going for squishies, and in that regard, Stonecutting Sword is just better for assassins. With warriors, you're kind of in an in-between place. If you want to go for some more damage, then you can also go Stonecutting Sword here. Simply same logic here, you trade out your warrior tabi. But if you want to go for something more tanky, you can just look in the support section basically and go for something like Winged Blade or even Ritual Dagger if you have Winged Blade already and you feel like you might need that. Really depends more on if you still need the extra power from what was your boots before, or if you think you're fine without it and you'd rather get some utility. Depends on how much you want to frontline and stuff like that as well. For supports, you obviously have the same options. Winged Blade if you didn't build it earlier and it makes any sense. Ritual Dagger if you're looking for some more cooldown reduction and some more benefits in regards to your relics. Or if you have a healer on your team, you can go for Rod of Asclepius, which will also help your team greatly. For mages, we're kinda in a bit of a not as great situation, I would say, because most items that provide you with movement speed don't provide you with power, unless you're talking about the normal boots. The only thing that really stands out here is Rod of Asclepius, because it still has higher power than the two starter boots. It is a fair bit more expensive because of that as well, and it gives you some extra health at the same time. You have to keep in mind though that you will lose the cooldown reduction or the flat penetration that you had beforehand, so it's not always 100% worth it. Most of the time it should be worth it though. The power should outclass the flat penetration, and the extra benefits really help as long as there's anyone on your team who can heal in one way or another, and the extra health really allowing you to survive more. Overall, I think especially Ritual Dagger and Winged Blade should be pointed out again, simply because they just kinda work for everyone. There's no role that you cannot ever get them on. Obviously they're not as great on burst characters that rely on their ability burst, but even on assassins, for example, they are quite frequently built, or especially Winged Blade is quite frequently built, and Ritual Dagger is just a little more of an offside niche item, but it can work decently in the right spots as well. So overall, you have a lot to choose from as long as you have a Nike on their team who has her full passive. Once again, keep in mind that this is at full passive and late game when you have the rest of your build. You should probably not trade out other items beforehand unless you feel like it's very important to get that right now and sell your boots for it. There are some scenarios where you should really be considerate about this. One of them being an Amaterasu on the enemy team, because it still gives the enemy team a lot of movement speed in team fights and stuff, and that way they can maybe get away from you and the extra movement speed will really help you. Or if you are against a team that has some characters that really work off movement speed, for example a Kali. If you're against a Kali and you're a squishy mage, then maybe you should have that little bit of extra movement speed, just so she can't stick to you quite as easily because she will have a lot of movement speed already. So keep that in mind. Keep in mind how many slows there are, if the extra movement speed can actually benefit you in some way, and if that's not the case, then consider if you want to trade out for one of the items mentioned beforehand. As we're coming to the end of the video, there's a few things that I just quickly want to address. So YouTube has been very weird for me lately, and if you want to make sure that you stay subscribed, then click at the notification thing down next to the subscription button. YouTube has actually unsubscribed some people from my channel automatically, and I don't know why. It's just a YouTube-wide glitch that's happening, but it may be affecting you. And apparently, if you get the notifications turned on, then it will first turn the notifications off before it removes the sub or whatever. It's just really weird. In the same sense, I am currently not uploading every day, as you may have noticed. I'm uploading every other day, because for some strange reason, I lose more subs when I upload every day than when I upload every other day. I actually get more subs that way, and at the same time it allows me to make some of the content that I was like, you know, pushing out because it was just too hard to make it in one day. So it's a bit beneficial in that regard, but at the same time it's really frustrating. I hope to go back to my normal schedule as soon as possible. I'm expecting to be able to do that in some point in the future when this whole system is fixed again. But I wanted to make sure to let you guys know so you're not left in the dark as to why you're suddenly not notified about my videos or why I'm not uploading daily or anything. Nothing should be forever in that regard. I really hope it just changes back. And I'm really sorry that it has to be that way, but at the moment I would be hurting my channel by uploading daily, which is just really freaking annoying. And I really hope these algorithms get fixed as soon as possible. With that, thank you guys for watching. I hope to see you for the next one in most likely 2 days. Sloth, out.